Hello, everybody. I'm John Gapper. I'm Chief Business Columnist of the Financial Times. And since it's the RTS, I brought my Tim Davies sneakers with me. One of the industries I write about, one of the most important industries I write about, is the creative industry in this country. As we've heard from Ted, is a vibrant, very important and crucial part of the economy. It's facing challenges, some of them common across the world, some of them particular to this country. And we've got a great panel to talk about it today, spread across a brilliant combination of voices from across the industry globally and the UK. I was just reading an online news story, not in the UK, not in the FT, I hasten to add, saying, reporting on Paramount and Warner Brothers Discovery's results last month, and saying they showed the irreversible doom of the industry. And I guess if there's irreversible doom, it's going to take several members of the panel down with it. However, there are some bright spots, and one of them is I think the Olympics. And I'm told that David Zaslav had a suite at the Hotel Crillon where he entertained people. Andrew, I hope you're among them.
Occasionally.
Was the cocktail cabinet good?
Yeah, it was actually very good. Thank you for asking.
Tell us about the Olympics and the importance of sport and what it showed you.
The Olympics was great. Paris 24, I think, hosted a fabulous Olympic Games, and one that I think the Olympic movement really needed after quite a tough few cycles. For us as a business, it was, I mean, for those in the audience who don't know, we broadcast the Olympics in 47 markets in 19 different languages. So 3,000 people pulling together over 12,000 commentary sessions. It is a huge logistical operational challenge for us, but it performed and outperformed all of our expectations on almost every one of our platforms. And I think obviously time zone really helped. Having it in the time zone of Europe certainly helped. And our results were fantastic. If you take our streaming platform, Max, which was launched in Europe in 25 markets just before the start of the Olympics, we've had huge uplift in audiences, also on Discovery Plus in the markets where we haven't launched Max yet. And the stat that I like on the Olympics, for this particular Olympics, is, you know, we surpassed our total subscriber numbers after day 4 compared to Tokyo. So we had more subscribers come on and buy the Olympics and engage with the content after day 4 than we had for the entirety of the Tokyo Games, which is huge. On linear, we outstripped our growth. We had over in the UK, for example, on Eurosport, we had double the number, 100% growth in linear audiences. So for us, it's done a fantastic job across all of the markets. The challenge, of course, is keeping the customers, no doubt. And the good news for us when it comes to keeping customers is what we've seen on Max in particular when compared to something like Discovery Plus, which is a completely different proposition. The non-Olympic engagement of content, so those customers who've come on to watch the Olympics, if you look at what else they've watched whilst they've also come on to watch the Olympics, we've had them watch twice as much content on Max as they have on Discovery Plus, with, of course, House of the Dragon leading that across Europe. And as a result, we are retaining twice as many as we are on Discovery Plus.
And that's telling us about sport, and it's telling us about live. You've mentioned, of course, the fragmentation of the audience. I happen to live in a household with 2 Gen Z consumers, and I very rarely see them in front of the television, but they watch a lot of content, they watch a lot of long-form drama on their devices in their rooms, at least I assume they do. But clearly there's huge fragmentation of audience, TikTok, other online channels. Is live and sport crucial to retaining the audience?
Live is crucial to making sure you know where the audience is, right? Live does attract audiences' appointment to view like no other content. The shift of entertainment content to VOD viewing is a well-trodden path. We all see that shift to VOD viewing. What live does is give people a reason to engage at the same time. And the Olympics, and I think Ted said, the idea that there are moments like the Olympics that focus a global population on a single event and what that creates in terms of a cultural impact, I think only live can really achieve.
Well, Cécile, I think you've done some research on what Sky audiences are watching, and you've got a pretty broad view across lots of different sort of contents and what engages people in the moment. Tell us a bit about that.
Well, I mean, the first thing I would say is, Sky is both a platform and a broadcaster. And the platform piece is, it's our aggregation business. It's basically the core and the kind of the legacy of the Sky story. And that sort of platform business is both the traditional sort of Q box, but now also the stream sort of product, which is our entertainment OS, which is very much a global product across the Comcast group. So we look at the world maybe slightly differently because we are a partner to, a lot of businesses actually in this room, and a very important partner because of the reach of that sort of Sky platform and the growing reach now with the OTT platform. And then within that, of course, we're also a creator of content and a curator of content with the Sky sort of exclusive content offering. And yes, we do know our audiences fairly well, like most sort of, other businesses in this room. And
how are they changing?
And look, the world's fragmenting, and there is obviously kind of no question about that. And I think increasingly, what that means is, as a program sort of creator and sort of curator, you have to think slightly differently about sort of what you sort of commission and what you acquire.
What makes it shorter and snappier?
No, not so much. I think by the way, I think the format is, in my view, a bit of a I think it's the wrong debate. I think it's what's the right format for the story. I don't think there's things have to be shorter or longer. You have to just be flexible in terms of adapting the length of your story to what you're trying to do and to say. But I suppose my point is increasingly, I think we have tribes. Right? And this idea to try and do things that work for everybody is you end up sort of not finding anybody. And so it's just really sort of finding those tribes, and
so it's not a single global
and
audience,
sort of going quite sort of deep and quite authentically
right.
into those particular tribes and sort of really developing that understanding.
And what do you do for the scatterbrained Gen Zers, not just mine?
But again, it's not to say that one tribe isn't going to watch, that there isn't some commonality and sort of, I think you can't necessarily sort of box people in. It's not, again, the old sort of demo as a proxy. It was a proxy because we couldn't sort of be sort of more specific and more nuanced about it. So again, I think it's again sort of finding those.
And in that research, what actually, rather than depresses you, excites you about?
But again, I mean, the other thing I would say is, data only goes so far, right? At the end of the day, what you're doing is you're backing creative people who you believe that have something to say, that will do it authentically, and will, as a team, you put an enormous amount of care in executing that vision to the best possible. So you're true to, again, the vision of the creator who comes to you. And so I think ultimately, that's why we're all in this business, is because that's the exciting piece, is to meet somebody who, has, an amazing story to tell and to kind of enable that. And ultimately, that's what we're here to do, and then take it to market. And I think the go-to-market these days is it's always been important, it's an incredibly important part of the puzzle, because, you have to go to people and find them where they are.
Right.
And they're not
And going to market means what? Sorry, forgive my ignorance.
It means everything from, how you're going to express the show sort of on social media, how you're going to market it, what you're going to lean into, and starting that process sort of fairly early on. We try to do that, at the green light stage, and again, try to be very deliberate about thinking through how, from a Sky standpoint, we will be able to get that show out and sort of help it.
So bring people in, bring a relatively fragmented audience into us.
And yes, and sort of getting that, what is that, the expression of that property going to be, on a TikTok, on a sort of YouTube, on an Instagram. And again, for each sort of, piece of content, you'll think about those platforms sort of slightly differently.
Okay. Nami, I think a bunch of people in this room will suffer from subscription fatigue. They can't quite remember which subscriptions they've got, and they might be shocked if they did realise. And while, as Ted says, Netflix is an incredible bargain at $4.99, it all adds up. But Disney has been experimenting in the States. Tell us a little bit about that and how you can bundle together different services.
Fantastic. Well, you can get Disney Plus for $4.99 as well in the UK, so I'd start with that.
Get a cup of coffee for $4.
So look, Disney Plus is relatively new. We've been only in the market for 4.5 years, and like any new business, we evolve and we test things and we learn from those. So when we launched here in the UK back in 2020, our content offering was anchored around our beloved global brands, so Disney, Pixar, Marvel, Star Wars, National Geographic. But then less than a year after that launch, we added all of our great general entertainment content from our TV studios, FX, ABC, and 20th. And then also added our local originals very quickly after. So we've constantly evolved and wanted to cater for all audiences, and actually the wide variety of content that we offer on Disney Plus is really working for us. So people are often surprised to find that half of our consumers are households without kids, which, Disney and kids, you put those together. And then more recently, last November, we actually offered and launched multiple price plans. And Ted touched it. It's giving choice to consumers, more flexibility, more value for money. And then if we look to the States, and actually we've got a great partnership with Max that just launched about 6-7 weeks ago. And that's great in that it brings all of the great storytelling from Max and combines it with Disney Plus and Hulu. And it's offering consumers...
That's discounted.
It is. So you have a discount. And unlike other bundling opportunities, you can buy it both from Max and from Disney and from Hulu. And the great thing there is the breadth of content that partnership brings, and we're finding it's working really well. People are engaging more, they're spending more time, and that, of course, helps them stay on platform and reduces churn.
And so is the future to kind of rebundle, in a sense, to sort of say, actually, a lot of these things are going to have to be more competitively priced, and you're going to have more of this wonderful content, but at an acceptable subscription price to the average household?
I think it really varies case by case. I mean, we operate across, obviously, the full region, Europe, Middle East, Africa, and we really look at what's the best option in each market, market by market. How are consumers, how many services are they subscribing to? How much are people willing to pay? So I think it's a case-by-case study. And actually, yes, bundling and partnerships, even when we launch, we have such fantastic partnerships here in the UK, but across the territories we operate in. So partnerships will always be a key role, I think, and have a key...
Right.
Benefit and actually provide convenience, I think, to consumers. And I think we'll see more and more of that. We've talked about audiences fragmenting and constantly fighting for that attention. And I think bundling does offer a great other alternative, more choice to the consumer again.
Sarah, I felt Ted was delivering a slightly mixed message to the public service broadcasters. He's saying it was a wonderful part of infrastructure in this country, but he wouldn't personally want to have a legacy business himself. You do have a legacy business. You have public service remit. You have all of these, I'm going to call them responsibilities, constrictions, traditions, and you're trying to find a new audience. Tell us about that.
I heard that public service broadcasters built Netflix. I thought that was a good, a good summary. I'm really proud to be a legacy business. I don't think it's a pejorative term at all. I see that as heritage. And I think I'm probably... my PSB counterparts would agree. We know this market so incredibly well. What a glorious thing that we've helped to build businesses elsewhere. What a glorious thing that there are other businesses coming into our market now that can help sustain the freelance space that we have here, that can make the most of the production outfits that we have here. But this ecosystem that's created all the glorious stuff that Ted was taking us through is built on legacy media. And exactly as Ted said, we spent a long time talking about windows and rights and distribution mechanics, and that's my day job. But the audience doesn't think like that. They don't think of us as legacy media. They just turn the telly on. So that's why the Media Act is so important for us, that when they turn the telly on, they find us, because we don't have the deep pockets to pay for that prominence. But whether they watch something live or on demand, whether they watch something, a piece of content of ours on someone else's platform or our own, it doesn't matter as long as they find it. What does matter is the brand that you exploit it under. We've announced recently that we're relaunching as 5. It may not sound like the biggest news, but actually it's totemic for us because we spent a long time working out what our brand stands for. We spent a long time researching with our audience what our rightful place is in this crazy, glorious ecosystem. We know it, we know our audience really well, and now we have to get all the editorial stuff that we create out into that marketplace under a recognisable brand.
Who is a Channel 5 viewer?
Let's go with what the brand is, because Channel 5 caters for everybody. It's accessible, it's unpretentious, it's very British, it's regional, It's not as based on the metropolis
cheap?
as others. It's free. I should have started with that. It's free.
No, I know
it's not cheap.
I know it's free,
of
but
course it's not cheap. It's
the
down to earth, though.
itself.
It's down to, look, some of the content that we make is now on Netflix, exactly as Ted said before. The IP that we cause to be created finds its way into other platforms. Rich House, Poor House. Cheap, not cheap. You make decision. Top 10 on Netflix when it was there. Our dramas, which use cheaper talent, and please don't quote me on that, because what I mean by that is British talent, not American Hollywood A-list talent. Put them on Netflix, they get into the top 10. I don't know what cheap is. All I know is we know what we're about editorially. I mean, what Ted started with audience-centric, quality, variety. I mean, Ben Frau has audience-centric tattooed on his forehead.
But I'm going to be... when we talk... let's talk about storytelling and content and what works. I'm going to be very unfair to you here. So when Ted talks about these very big, high-prestige productions... Channel 5 isn't necessarily the first thing you think of when you think of these big name-check hits, the Baby Reindeers. So what does it add? What form of content making really cuts through?
Paramount is, by the way, but speak for Channel 5, local.
Granted.
So I hear the streamers, and I hear this in my organisation as well, the local content created in the UK does very well on Paramount. Paramount Plus is an important part of that offering.
Yep.
And there are lots of examples of that.
But that's a gift
But
of the
Channel
world
5
rather than...
is true local. Ted caters for 190 countries, I cater for 1. I only care about the UK audience. If that content ends up having a life in other territories, and it does often, and that's thanks to the indies that distribute it so well, brilliant. We're great, we're happy. But our job is to reach the outer regions and the broad base of the UK. I really applaud a lot of what Netflix and others are doing in this market. If we were a UK television family before, and when new cousins arrive, the worst thing you can do is to sort of push them out. We all share a DNA. A lot of the people that work in these streamers come from the public service system. That's great. We'll learn to partner with them. But when they talk about local, they mean something that travels around the world. When we talk about local, we mean something that speaks to very small communities. And that will be the hallmark of what public service broadcasting is here for. And the streamers will never do it. I mean, when I was at Edinburgh talking about being more British, it's fantastic content that's coming through unscripted from Netflix now. Victoria Beckham, Take That, brilliant. We don't do that. We don't need to do that. We take a documentary to the Shetland Isles with a tiny indie that wouldn't otherwise have got into the television business. We partner with someone, another small indie that we've helped grow with content in Yorkshire. That's really important in our ecosystem. And I don't think the streamers want to obliterate that. We have to find a way of working them to help sustain that. But that's what our content is for.
Andrew, you know about the balance of a global company and a local one. How do you think about it in content terms, in terms of what should be made here, what engages the audience? Are you always thinking, well, this might engage this audience, but it can also engage a wider audience? Or
we make a lot in this country. I mean, in terms of what we are as a business here, the theatrical business, Leavesden, what we produce, House of the Dragons, would be known as a US HBO product, but it's actually made here in the UK. So there's a huge amount of inward investment that we make in the UK. And probably a little known fact is we also have what can't technically be described as small independent producers, because they also supply some content to us, probably less than 10%, but they do supply Sarah's network through our independent production companies littered around the country. So we definitely have a huge amount of local production that we do here and support the local industry. I think local, when we commission and we talk to our commissioning team, they think local first. They think, will this story work in the market here first? If we do go through a green light process, then the decision is made based on the home market. And whilst we may not be
and why
as
is that?
local
Is that
as
looking at
Channel 5,
the overall economics, or just saying that this is what we've got to do?
The story...
I mean, Ted mentioned...
But that's the point.
Ted mentioned when he was talking, he said, well, you've got to think that way, because you can't just think of a sort of global mishmash.
If you try to be something for everyone, you'll end up being nothing for anyone. And the problem with not thinking local first is you've got to think about the audience that you're trying to tell the story for, and then I think Ted said it really well, hope it travels internationally. And the strength of some of our global businesses like Paramount and Paramount Plus is you can take that story and see if there are global audiences who will also be interested in it and see if you can create a phenomenon. I mean, if you ask Netflix, I'm sure they would say they tried to, recreate Squid Games 1,000 times, but you just can't. It's a genuinely local story that found a global audience. And I think every time that we think about what we do in this country and the commissions that we have, it's always local. We launched Max in Europe. When I looked at the top titles, both in terms of acquisition and engagement, they were locally produced content based from our networks that are located in those markets. That's what drove initial engagement when we launched Max. House of the Dragon came along, and of course, it actually found a new audience and continued to evolve that engagement on Max. But the local content's what drives a large part of even streaming platforms.
Cécile, what do you think about that? As you say, you've got a foot in both camps in the sense of being a broadcaster platform.
So first thing I would say is like the fact that local works better is not a new insight. It's always been the case that audiences would rather sort of watch something that is sort of relatable to them than something that isn't, right? So that's not a new insight. I think because of the advent of global streamers, the debate got maybe at one point a little kind of bit sort of muddled. But we see the same thing on Sky. So if you look at our top sort of 20 shows, the vast majority are the originals that we commission here, whether it's a comedy like Brassic or Mr. Big Stuff that we just launched sort of this past summer, which is one of our biggest launches in a while, or Gangs of London, which is actually that's incredibly anchored, obviously sort of in London, but happens to actually have worked also internationally. So I think you're always going to commission something locally for your audience. And if it doesn't work in your home market, by the way, it's got no chances probably of sort of working elsewhere. And then if you do something that is incredibly authentic and taps into themes that are fairly universal, then it has a chance of finding audiences elsewhere. But you can't reverse engineer it. Right. So again, it's about sort of authentically delivering something for somebody. And again, it goes back to that sort of creator and their truth and what they're trying to tell.
Do you think the American audience, the global audience, has changed in the sense that I think, people in my generation, we grew up watching American content. We were used to movies about New York, westerns, sort of local content about Nevada. And we were also used to BBC content, but the two didn't really meet very much. Now we're finding this sort of authentic French shows like Emily in Paris are crossing the world.
So yeah, one of the things that the streamers have done.
Made by Paramount.
Oh, well, yeah. I won't sort of address the French piece. I think one of the things the streamers have done, which I think is a good thing, is some of these shows now, which would probably never have found an audience before, are now finding an audience, and so people are finding Lupin, or they're finding shows that, and getting used to watching them sometimes with subtitles. So I think that and same with all the Scandi shows. So I think that's actually a good thing, but they will still be few and far between. They will happen, and it's brilliant that they happen. But at the end of the day, the bulk of what you're going to do is cater to your audience in sort of your country, and then same with the U.S. shows. They don't all travel. Not all of them do. Some are very culturally specific, but a number of them do. And yeah, you're right. We're maybe more used to sort of seeing content. But again, as sort of programmers, you're always going to be sort of focused on the authenticity of what you're doing locally. But there's something in music for the most part. Yeah. And even sort of with the platforms and the algorithms, what we're seeing in the music business is not dissimilar, which is local repertoire is also sort of growing and sort of working.
Now, I hate to be gloomy, but some recent figures, we've come off peak TV in terms of spending for the fantastic UK production base, independent production companies. They're under a lot of pressure because they're finding that the spend is not what it was. There's consolidation. Some of the excitement that the streaming revolution brought has subsided, and people are sort of saying, we've got a lot of studio space, we've got a lot of companies, the contracts are a bit harder to find. What are your reflections on the sort of environment for independent production and production in this country at the moment?
So what I would say is, and I think both Anna and Ted mentioned it, the UK creative industry's got a long history of attracting investment, and I don't see that changing. Yes, there's trends that cycle in and out, but we as Disney have been investing in this market for decades. I mean, in the last 5 years, we've spent $3.5 billion in our productions just in the UK. And if we look to the next 5 years, we're looking to spend about $1 billion a year across the UK and EMEA. So this market's still very buoyant in terms of attracting investment in. You know, big hits like Deadpool and Wolverine were actually filmed and made at Pinewood, where we have a long lease. And actually what that does is the amount of jobs it creates. We've created about 32,000 jobs, or supported 32,000 jobs through our investment in the past 5 years. Something like Deadpool and Wolverine, actually that's 1,400 crew and cast and 800 UK vendors. The knock-on impact of that investment is huge and really does support the creative industries. But I think you have to recognize there are challenges. And what we do is try and work across the full spectrum of the market. So we're also working at the kind of grassroots and partnering with the likes of BFI and the National Film and Television School to try and develop skills, to try and bring and attract new people into the industry. So yes, I think it's evolving and it's, you know, rapidly changing. But I believe in and I'm very optimistic about the UK's ability to maintain the creative industries and continue to attract investment.
But we're also investing in studio space in this market.
Are you still investing in studio
Sky is
space?
investing
Because
in
as a journalist, I would say, well, hold on a second. These guys have got a huge amount of studio space. There's been a huge amount of money pumped into this stuff. Mm-hmm. Are they about to run over the cliff?
So if I may just jump in, so you know, we obviously have rebuilt sound stages in Elstree.
Yeah.
We opened the sound stages about a year ago now, and I think what we've seen is there was, you know, a couple of years ago, the mood music was we need a lot more studio space in the UK. I would say that is not true anymore. I think we have a lot of studio space. I think there's brilliant facilities in the UK, brilliant crews. But, well, you know, some of it is obviously sort of post-strike with the film industry, sort of the volumes haven't come back as quickly, I think, as people thought they would. You know, we're starting to see things pick up again a bit. Whether, you know, how the trend line goes, I think, is a question mark. But certainly as an owner of studio space, Sky, we're looking at it. I mean, we're not pessimistic about it, but we're certainly cautious.
Well, certainly enough.
We're certainly cautious for now, right? And you know, I want to make big predictions on, you know, where it's going to go. So yes, there is still demand. It's still a brilliant place to film. But I think the kind of the huge hubris of 3 years ago, I think everybody's sort of calmed down a little bit on that. So I think, but I think within that, I think it's really important as the government continues to support the ecosystem here through, you know, the tax breaks, the relief on the business rates from 6 months ago were hugely welcome in terms. So I think
Well, I think there's going to be a lot of handouts in the budget.
So I think that's actually been passed right before, just before the summer. So I think the kind of the message is nobody should take it for granted. And we certainly need to continue the support of the government here to kind of sustain that.
Andrew,
I think we're a little bit more optimistic than that, if I'm being honest. We are, from our point of view, investing out at Leavesden quite significantly because we believe over the long period of time the competitive nature of the UK market will continue to attract more and more productions, even internationally. And I don't think we should underestimate the price advantage of producing content in the UK, especially versus the US. And you see a lot of US production companies now saying, actually, I'm going to go abroad to produce these shows because the tax breaks, the incentives, the crews, the skills are so much better overseas that actually we're going to go and do that rather than produce it in the US. So I think we still see a lot of people coming to the UK over time and continue. And we are starting to see, certainly not the pandemic levels of scripted content creation writ large, absolutely not. But the volume of content that still needs to be created, we think will still drive demand in the UK, but we have to remain competitive in the UK because there are other markets that are certainly looking to establish themselves as alternatives to the UK, and so we can't take it for granted.
I don't think it's quite that rosy, and I think we need to be very careful not to tell ourselves it is. So I recognise what these guys are saying as regards the global streamer investment. Paramount has the same. We're doing big, high-end scripted drama here. I recognise and applaud the $6 billion that Netflix has spent since 2020. But if I put my Channel 5 hat back on, which I wear very proudly, the SME, more than half of our producers are SMEs. We worked with 73 indies last year. These are small production companies where you have to nurture the relationship, and that's where the talent comes from. They're not the smaller businesses that the big spenders are coming and working with. And we have, I feel this really strongly, we have such a responsibility to connect the two. Because I genuinely think there is a freelance crisis at the moment. If you talk to the film and TV charity, they're doing the most extraordinary work and they have not got enough money to give out to keep people staying in the industry. We have to keep the grassroots skill set that we can sit up here and applaud, which we all do. We have to keep it in work so it's there to grow into working on the bigger productions. You can't go straight on to a high-end scripted. You start on something small, you learn, you grow. I started as a trainee. Anne from Netflix was a trainee with me. We were so lucky to be in a system that enabled that. Nearly said how many years ago it was, a few too many years ago. But we really, really, and we have such a responsibility as successful streamers as well as national broadcasters to ensure we invest properly in that space.
I would second, sorry, because I mean, there's two parts to your question, right? There's the investment coming into these big sort of facilities, and then there's the local infrastructure in terms of, you know, the independent production community, which there's no question has really been suffering the last sort of 18 months. Some of that is, you know, cost of living crisis. Some of that is more structural. And so what we try to do is maintain our commissioning investment. Because to your point, you know, the reason why the UK has this creative edge is because there is this community that does absolutely incredible work that's been sustained and created, you know, historically through the PSBs. And so again, I think there's a kind of an ecosystem in the UK that is quite specific and quite rare, and it needs to be sustained and to be protected.
Yeah.
Sarah, and just to go global for a second, I think you've just got a new owner, or
We're getting a new owner.
probably, and David Ellison was talking about positioning Paramount to improve its profitability, which would make me nervous if I was listening to that. There's a lot of tectonic plates shifting in the States. There's a lot of asset write-downs, actually. There's a lot of squeezing of cash and saying how big are these businesses, how profitable are these businesses really, and when they sneeze, we catch a cold over here. What's your feeling?
Well, it may disappoint you, but it's a huge relief to me that I can't talk about the transaction that's underway. So I'm afraid I'm not giving you anything on that. And I will say that from a UK perspective within an American organisation, they have recognised the value of what we're creating and they continue to invest in us and always have done. And actually perversely, or counterintuitively rather, we have become more British as a Channel 5, under American ownership in the last decade. We're more than double of our content now versus when they bought us. So local ecologies can thrive in a global marketplace, but I'm afraid I'm giving you nothing on the Skydance transaction.
What do you think about that balance with Walt Disney is quite a big American company?
It is indeed, but I think what we have, and I think it's kind of unique, is we can combine our global brands and franchises that are beloved around the globe, and I think add to that fantastic local stories. And I think the thing that connects it all, and we've talked about it, you've heard it in different ways, is it's authentic storytelling that connects minds and hearts. And that's what's unique about what we can do, the wide variety that we offer, not just on our Disney Plus platform, but remember, we also have the strength of our established businesses. We talk about consumer choice. We still have 250 million viewers to our linear networks in the region. I mean, that's how consumers are still choosing to consume. And we've continued to license our content to many partners in this room in ways that work for us and work for them. So I think it's about, Sarah, you touched on it, we're completely embedded in the local ecology in every market we operate in. And for us, partnering with the broadcasters and helping sustain the ecologies that we're embedded in are so critical to the way we operate. And I think that's well understood in our business.
Just before we close, I'm going to ask these guys a quick question they won't answer. What's the future of Sky Atlantic and HBO Max and it's going over the top in the UK?
Well, we are going to launch Max in the UK come 2026.
You did answer the question.
I did answer the question, but we have answered the question repeatedly. So, you know, we can only say the same thing. We will definitely launch Max in the UK market in 2026. The question is, what partnerships will we bring with us on that journey? Sky has been a long-standing partner with us for that content over many years, and we know that a lot of the fans of our franchises and content sit on Sky's platform. And so there is good reason for us to be having discussions about launching together with Sky, but we haven't found an agreement yet. So we need to continue having that conversation, and we'll see where it goes.
And I'll give the Sky version of that response, which is we've had a long-standing, successful partnership, and you know, we have hope, and there's, I think I would go one step further. There's no version of the world where when Max launches D2C, it's not available for Sky customers.
Okay.
So that would be my final.
We've heard a lot, and I know our new Secretary of State for Culture, Media and Sport, Lisa Nandy, will be with us later. I'm going to ask each of the panel, not each of the audience, that might take a bit long, each of the panel quickly to give me what's your message to her. Sarah?
Thank you for the Media Act. I know that you support it in opposition, and we ask you to ensure that it's executed and implemented in a fair, commercial, but they're designed to do what it was there for, which is ensure that British audiences find British-created, public service-funded content. And we haven't talked about individual genres particularly, but I'm just going to do a shout-out for kids' content, because I worry about kids' content as much as I worry about the grassroots freelance base. We still have 3 hours of dedicated public service, a kids' block on Channel 5 every day, but it's getting harder and harder to fund that now the Young Adult Content Fund is gone. I know it's a concern of theirs. We're going to help all we can, but it's another example of absolutely brilliant creative talent that this market can put onto the global stage, but it has to be funded properly.
Nami?
Well, thanking them for actually recognising the importance of the creative industries and making it a priority in their industrial strategy, I would say is the first. And then in terms of specifics, we've talked about it, ensuring there's a tax incentives regime that continues to attract investment into the market. And I would say one specific one, which is to reform the apprenticeship levy. Yeah. We've talked a lot about the grassroots, but to reform that so that productions can make use of it and attract these young talent and develop those skills that's so vitally important for our future.
Cécile?
Yeah, it looks similar. I think the tax credit regime, it's incredibly important to maintain it.
Yeah.
I think and again, from a studio standpoint, the issue of the business rates is still, we've had relief, it's still very much a live issue. And if we want the UK to stay competitive, it's really important that continues. And then I would second the apprentice point.
And what's your sense of the mood in terms of government support?
So I think right now the mood is, we like the mood. I think they've said all the right thing, but we'll have to see, right?
Andrew?
Well, I think what I mentioned before remains true, which is we do have a really good economic environment to produce content in this country, but we need to keep maintaining that. We should not rest on our laurels. The apprenticeship program, skills development is critical that we continue to focus on, and I would say a lot of good work has been done up until now on the media bill and the tax credits, and even if the business rates gets followed through as it's anticipated, then that's good too. But we still need to fight to maintain that competitive advantage in this market. So focusing on that, I think, is important.
Okay, great. Well, thank you very much to the panel. We covered a lot of ground, and